What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Nick and this is Idaho Up, and today I'm going to be starting something new, and that's going to be changing this 2020 Harley Davidson Street Bob you see sitting in front of you into a club style Harley Davidson motorcycle. This video is going to be covering the first step in this process, which is slapping an S&S SuperStreet Race 2-in-1 exhaust system on the Sideshow Bob here. The second video in this series is going to cover risers and handlebars and everything you need to know to install them, and we'll go from there until we ultimately have something that's worthy of being called a club style bike. So if this process sounds like something you'd be interested in, you're probably going to want to stick around and continue to watch the follow-up videos. I will tell you that I'm going to go a little different route than I did with the Lowrider S, and I'm going to try to stay a little more traditional with this bike. I'll also tell you that my goal here is to create a series of videos that anybody out there, especially people with limited experience behind a wrench, can use to create their own club style motorcycle. But before we get into it, if you haven't done the three things, make sure you knock it out and help me put Idaho up on the map. I pride myself on creating content that is truly helpful to other people out there, and one of the ways I know I'm accomplishing that mission is when people are subscribing. So I thank you guys that have already subscribed. So now that I've ran my mouth for entirely too long, let's get into this. Okay, before we get into this, I did want to point out a couple things. One of them being, I got the race only model of this pipe. There's also a 50 state legal pipe, and they look exactly the same as far as I know, except I have noticed online other people that got the race only one ended up with this etching right here that said race only. I did have a fear that that was going to happen, and I did have intentions of possibly returning the pipe if that happened. But luckily, they have since put that engraving, at least with the one I received, on the back of the pipe. So now, when you mount it, you no longer see it, but it says S&S Cycle race only for closed course competition only. Luckily, I live in Idaho. I don't live in a state that has as strict as emissions laws as, let's say, California. So if that was something you had a concern about, they do make that pipe without that stamp. I purchased this one from Revzilla, so if you plan on getting the same pipe, and the reason you might want to go with this pipe, another reason besides emissions, is it's a lot cheaper. So, but if you want to purchase this pipe, maybe just considering calling Revzilla or whoever you're going to purchase it from and confirming that that stamp is on the back side of the pipe. The other thing you're going to have to purchase if you run this pipe is S&S's brake pedal kit that pushes this out farther, because that pipe's too thick to sit in between the stock brake pedal assembly and the motor. So I purchased the S&S brake pedal kit, which will give you enough gap in there. It does use some parts from the original assembly, so you're gonna have to retain some of those. But essentially what it does is it adds some spacers and pushes it out so you can fit the pipe in, and then it gives you a new brake pedal. All right, we're gonna start this off by taking the heat shields off that cover the headers so that we can get to the bolts that mount to the motor. Okay, I just want to point out that in order to get this second shield off, you have to go ahead and remove the stock brake pedal assembly because it's too tight to pull it out. So we're just going to go ahead and do that now, and then we'll get on with taking the rest of the shields off.
To remove the assembly, you're going to start by taking this bolt out that connects the push rod to the link, and you're going to hang on to this bolt because you're going to reuse it to reconnect the push rod to the new link that's included in the S&S kit. From there, you're going to remove the bolts that attach the assembly to the frame, and you can just throw these bolts in the bin because the kit comes with some longer bolts that you're going to use to reattach it. Okay, before I took this final bolt out, I just wanted to point out how this all works and how easy it is to replace these parts. What you're going to do is you're going to retain the push rod, which is this piece right here, and you're just going to tie it into the new link provided in the kit. And the link is this other side that connects to the brake cylinder and applies pressure to the rear brake. So here's a better look at the push rod that we're going to retain with the new assembly. And now that we got this off, we can get back to taking the heat shields off.
Okay, at this point, that's all the heat shields you need to take off. You don't need to worry about taking these ones off because you can get to the disassembly bolts without taking the heat shields off.
So before we take the headers off, we're going to take the bottom pipe off. And to take the pipes off, you just loosen this nut off of these bolts. And then you'll see these two Allen keys for the bottom pipe. And there's two Allen keys also for the top pipe. And after you take those out, you can just pull the pipe off. But like I said, we're only removing the bottom pipe because that's all we need to do to get the headers off. But I am going to loosen the bottom heat shield just so I have a better shot of those Allen keys and it's not pulling on the heat shield as I'm backing them out. After you get the nut loose and the two bolts out, you can pull that bottom pipe. And now you can see two bolts behind the pipe that help secure the pipe to the motorcycle. And although you can get to the bottom bolt without removing the pipe, you can't get to the top bolt, which is why we had to remove that bottom pipe.
All right, from here, we're just gonna leave that second bolt in there. It is loose just to kind of hold the whole pipe up while we loosen the bolts that attach the headers to the motor. And then when we get those all off, we'll take the whole pipe off from here. Okay, so if you're worried about scratching this cover, which I didn't, I just wanted to touch on this, just go ahead and take it off before you take the headers off from the motor. You're gonna have to take it off anyway because one of the O2 sensors goes into that cover and you have to unplug it. so that you can take the pipe off with the O2 sensors, which you'll later take off and reuse on the new pipe.
So I'm not gonna lie to you, that front bolt on that most forward header is kind of hard to get off. So as you can see, I had to create a contraption with my socket wrench in order to get to it. But this is kind of where some patience pays off. Just be patient and you'll get it off. Last but not least, before you take the pipe off, again, make sure you unplug those O2 sensors. There's two of them, one underneath the battery cover and one at the front end of the bike.
Okay, so the second O2 sensor is plugged in at the front of the bike, and you're gonna find the plug down here. Just follow this line and the plug's right here, and you undo it from underneath the bike.
Okay, now we can remove the stock exhaust, and all we have to do is completely remove that bolt that I earlier left loose, and then just kind of work the headers off the bolts that mount them to the motor, making sure we don't damage them. And that's it, the stock exhaust is off, and now we're going to move on to everything we need to do prior to installing the new exhaust, and we're going to start by removing the exhaust gaskets and replacing them with some new ones. Prior to putting the new gasket in, just make sure there's no grime left behind from the old one, and then just slowly work the new gasket in so you don't bend it. Now we're going to swap out the brake pedal link for the new link that was included in the S&S kit. And to do that, we're going to pull this pin, but make sure you retain it because you're going to reuse it with the new link. Before you take the link off, just take a second to notice how much free play's in it so you have a good idea before putting the new one back on. Also, in order to get the link off, you're going to have to take the master cylinder off because there's a nut on the back side of the link that you can't get to unless you do this. Make sure you hold on to the hardware for the link because you're going to reuse this as well. One thing I noticed when I was trying to put the stock pin into the aftermarket link is that it was a little tight, probably because of the paint. I just took a small hammer and lightly tapped it in until it went through, and it went in easy enough. Just make sure you're not bending anything while you're doing this. Now we're just going to swap out the stock brake pedal for the S&S brake pedal on the brake assembly.
Okay, now we're going to move to the stock pipe, and there's six things you're going to reuse from the old pipe. And that's going to be this piece right here, of course the part that mounts it to the motor, and then the O2 sensors. So you're going to use all three on that side and all three on this side.
Okay, now we're going to prep the S&S headers to install on the bike, and we're going to start by blocking out the wideband O2 sensor holes. And it comes with these plugs so you can do that. And I'm running the stock O2 sensors, so this is what you would do in that case. And then you just put the stock O2 sensors in the other set of holes. Okay, now we're just going to take the snap rings and the clamps from the stock headers and put them on the S&S headers. Now we're going to use the included hose clamps to attach the heat shields to the headers, but we're not going to tighten it down all the way because it'll make it a pain when we later go to install the headers onto the motorcycle. The other things you want to think about here are where the nuts are on the heat shields. You want to make sure you put them in a position where you're going to be able to tighten them once we install the headers to the bike. And the last thing we got to do before we can put the exhaust on is put the bracket on that holds the exhaust securely onto the motorcycle. Keep in mind this wasn't the bracket that was on it previously. This did come with the S&S pipe. I will note that the S&S bags also came with this piece, which can be mounted behind this pipe bracket in case you're planning on running a set of bags that needs a little more support. I have a set of bags in mind that most likely won't use this piece, so I chose not to install it. If that later changes, I can slip it in easy enough. Okay, at this point we can put the headers onto the motorcycle, and we're just going to put the clamps over the bolts and tighten them down firm, but don't tighten them down completely tight at this point. Okay, now we can attach the pipe to the header, but just make sure the nut that attaches it is facing towards the ground and out so that you can tighten it. Here I'm just showing you where the dog bone sits that mounts the pipe to the bracket and holds it on, but it'll probably rattle out while you're trying to put the pipe onto the header. I just wanted to show you where it was at for now. After you get the pipe pushed onto the header and the dog bone lined up with the bolt holes on the bracket, you can go ahead and start cinching it down. Now we're going to put the heat shield on that goes over the pipe and the headers, and you'll notice that there's two tabs on this heat shield that slide under the heat shields in front of it, and then you use the hose clamp to tighten it on the other side. This is also one of the reasons you didn't want to tighten the header heat shields prior to putting them on the bike, because then it makes it harder for the tabs on this one to slide underneath them. Now we're going to go ahead and tighten down the pipe onto the header. Now we're just going to tighten the clamps on the headers onto the motor. Again, that forwardmost nut on the header is kind of hard to get tightened down. Just practice some patience, mess around with your wrench and your socket, and eventually you'll get it tightened down. After the headers have been tightened down, just go through and start tightening down all the heat shields. don't forget to plug in your O2 sensors, one underneath the bike and one under the battery cover. And finally, we're on the home stretch. We just need to reattach the brake assembly and make sure the push rod is connected to the new link. Okay, before you start the bike, make sure you take a minute to clean it off real well. You don't want any Loctite, fingerprints, or anything else you might have got on there during the install to permanently get burned into the pipe. Now I'm going to do a quick startup and pull the throttle a few times just so you get a feel for how the pipe sounds. That's it for this one, guys, but remember, step 2 for Sideshow Bob's club style makeover is a new set of risers and a new set of handlebars, so make sure you keep an eye on the channel so you don't miss that one. This is Nick with Idaho Up, and I'll see you next time.